Repousse is a metalworking technique in which a moldable piece of metal is ornamented by pressing or hammering from the reverse side to create a low relief on the front. To make a repousse picture, the first thing you'll need is a plan in the form of a drawing that's going to be exactly the same size and look exactly the same as you want your metal project to look. First, take a couple small pieces of tape and tape your picture directly onto the metal, and use one little piece of tape on each end, and that'll hold it securely enough. And then you'll be using a soft mat like the one you see here. I've stapled 3 or 4 pieces of felt together and it works really well, but you could use other things too. You also use a ballpoint pen, something with a point that's hard enough that when you press down on it, it won't break. So usually pencils don't work really well for this. And you trace over all of your lines of your main design, but you don't trace any of the small details or any of the textures or patterns yet. And it should come through about like that. So you just want to be careful that when you push down on it, that you don't push hard enough to make a hole in it. In fact, if you're worried about that, you might want to practice on some scrap pieces of metal first, just to make sure. Because you do want it to be able to be seen, but you don't want holes. And you'll want to just check periodically. And now I'm speeding it up to about 800 times faster than I'm actually working so that we can get all the way through it and you can see it done. So I keep turning it over just to make sure that I'm getting everything that I want to get. And you notice that all of the little patterns and textures aren't on there yet because they're not supposed to be. Okay, so this is what it looks like now. This is the end of this step. Next, I'm going to work on the creature and its immediate surroundings, in other words, the foreground. And being the foreground, it's going to need to come out farther than everything else. And again, it's a metalworking technique in which a moldable metal is ornamented by pressing or hammering from the reverse side to create a low relief. I'm using a tooling stick like this. It has a blunt point at one end, and then it has a wedge-shaped tip at the other end. And mostly for this stage of the game, you're going to be using the wedge-shaped tip. And basically what I do is I use it right down on the flat part of the wedge instead of up on the tip of the wedge for most of the areas. And as you see here, I'm just pressing down hard, right down on the flat part of the tip, and rubbing and going right up to the edges of the different shapes so that I can press it outward. You just press really firmly and take your time, and see I'm coming up on the edge of it now to go around to make the edge of this shape sharper. Then I go on to the next shape. You go only up to the lines of the shapes. You don't go over the lines because that'll help define what the shape is. And as you go up to the lines, it'll actually help define the line as well. But you see what I'm doing with each one of these shapes? I'm going over it smoothly, and I'm using mostly the flat part. If you use the flat part, you're not going to have to worry about holes so much. Now this is from the front, and this is what I was trying to achieve by working from the back. This is repousse. So you've seen what repousse looks like up close. And so that's the technique you'll be using for the entire picture, the foreground, and the actual subject. So you see that I've got my picture up above the actual metal so that I can refer to it. And I'm working from the back of the metal using the flat part of my tooling stick and pressing down like you saw in that close-up demonstration that I just showed you. And notice that it's also on the soft mat. It's on a soft surface to allow the metal to actually expand on the other side. And And so see, this is what I'm trying to achieve, like I showed you in that earlier demonstration. So now I'll speed this up to 800 times my actual speed and give you a chance to kind of see the whole process. And I keep turning it over to just check and make sure that it's looking the way I want it to look. And when I do push out the areas, I make sure that I keep the areas separated so it doesn't all end up being just one big shape of nothing, but it has a lot of defined shapes, and that way it defines the image that I'm trying to make. Alright, once I get my foreground and my subject all pressed out into relief, this is what it looks like. And now I'm going to turn it over again, working from the same side, but this time I've removed the mat and I'm going to work on the hard tabletop. And I'm doing this so that I can actually iron out wrinkles and really define the areas using the flat part of my tooling stick again. And this works really well. You see how I'm just getting rid of all these different wrinkles and things like that were left from working on the soft surface. And I'm going right up against all of the different shapes, because with this particular project, it really matters just how clear your image is. If there's a lot of wrinkles and it obscures your image so you can't really see it, then the project really isn't effective at all. Okay, so now I'm speeding it up again so that you can see the whole process, see me go over the whole image. And chances are I'll probably come back and go over this again later on toward the end of my project, just to sharpen everything up. So I don't really have to necessarily consider that this is the last time I'm going to work on this part. Alright, now I'm going to do the middle ground. I'm going to flatten it out, and so I'm going to work from the front. So I've turned it over, and you can see that the relief part is sticking up. And I'm using the flat part of my tooling stick, and I am basically flattening out all of the middle ground. And when I do that, that makes the foreground and the subject stand out more. And I go right up along the edges of all of the different shapes, and that helps define them. Alright, now I'm going to work from the front again, and I'm going to work back on the mat, and I'm pressing the background down, and in this case it's going to mean mainly the sky area. And so, you know, this is mainly to get it pushed back. It's going to be wrinkled because of pushing it back on the softer surface, but it'll establish the different levels. So I have the higher level, which is the relief, the foreground and the subject, and then I have the medium level, which is the middle ground, and now I'm going to have the lowest level pushed back, which is the background. Okay, now that I've pushed it back, I'll work with it on the table, and that'll help me get the wrinkles out and things like that, and really make everything crisp and defined. Now after you've defined all of your levels, now it's time to go back over the whole thing and evaluate and make sure everything is as crisp and clear as you can get it, so that you'll be able to put the textures and details on and it'll actually look good. And so right now I'm going back over it. So that really is one of the steps. You do the foreground, middle ground, background, and then you go back over the whole thing to make sure that you get it all defined and as smooth as you can get it. Okay, now I'm working on the texture, and I'm working from the back. I'm using my original drawing as a reference, and I'm using my ballpoint pen, and I'm drawing the textures and the details right into the back of the metal. Now again, you might want to practice on a scrap piece of metal so that you know exactly how much pressure you need to make the thing stand out on the front without creating a hole. And you'll probably be going a lot slower than this. I've speeded this up. But you see, I turn it over and then I can tell what it's actually going to turn out looking like. And then I turn it back over and work from the back again, and notice I'm working on the soft mat. But that's why you have to be careful at this step, because you're using the point and you're using a soft mat. And if you are not careful, it's going to cause a lot of rips and tears in your metal. Here I'm putting scales on his little legs. And you can see I've added some like plant formations down there in the foreground, and I'm adding a few more, and I'm doing it from the back. And see, this is what it looks like from the front. Now I'm going to use a technique called chasing, which means that I'm working from the front of the metal now, and I'm using a tool to etch lines and details into it. And in this case, I'm using a really soft metal, and I'm using my ballpoint pen again. But in a lot of cases, you'd be using harder metal and different kinds of tools. But I'm putting this line pattern in. And so those are all my details and things. And then I can check it over to make sure that I have all of my details and things the way I want them before I put the finish on. The finish is designed to cut down on some of the reflections so that you can see the image a lot easier. So in this case, what I've done is I'll be using black spray paint, just spraying a thin coating over the metal, and that's something that I'll do because it's toxic, and I wouldn't want to be doing that in a room full of students. But then it'll dry in the meantime, and then when you come back to class, I'll give you a piece of steel wool like this, and then what you'll do is you'll buff over your metal, and you can press down enough to get some of the black paint off, but you don't want to press down enough to destroy your details and things. But basically what this does is it takes the black paint off of the raised areas and leaves it in the dark areas, and that helps define the subject, make it more clear, and make it show up better. So when you're doing this step, just remember that the whole reason for doing this step is to make your design show up more. So always keep that in mind, and don't think that you have to take all of the black paint off. Just, use your judgment and make sure it shows up really nice. And you can have a lot of the silver showing too. So I hope you really have fun with this. It's really a neat technique, and you can get bigger pieces, and you can make a picture, almost any kind of picture you want, and you can put it into a frame. Black frames look really nice, as do silver frames on this. So if you ever have a chance, try some more than just what you can do in class here.